and welcome to Tullahoma's Cooking. I'm your host, Kelly Lepshinsky, here in my home kitchen again today to make you a dish that's really comfort food. It's cabbage-based dish and it's called Haluski. Now, even though it has a Polish name, it is not a dish that I grew up with or even knew until a year or two ago. I was making something with cabbage and had some leftover cabbage to use, and I started scouring the internet for something to do with it. Now, it had already been cooked, so I wasn't going to find a coleslaw or something along that lines. I needed something that would cook the cabbage, and what I found was this dish that in not just Poland, in other countries in that area, is a comfort food. It's made a variety of different ways, all of them very, very easy. So we're going to get to it here today. Now I'm going to bring in my cart so that you can see me, and I have my head of cabbage here. I have got some water boiling. We're going to get to a noodle part of this dish a little bit later. And then in this pot, I've got a little bit of melted butter waiting for our cabbage and our onion. Now I've pre-cut my onion today, but I wanted to get to cutting the cabbage on camera because if you don't work with cabbage a lot, it's so easy, but you really want to avoid this core. There's a lot around the core of a cabbage that's very, very bitter. Now maybe you make coleslaw and you already know this and you are well aware of cutting up a cabbage, but we're just going to go ahead and cut this guy in half and start getting that core out of him. All right, now you can already see I've cut him a little off center so that you can see this larger portion of core in this section here. I'm going to cut him into quarters, and I did make this one very large. This one I don't even think I left any bit of core on. I put him off to the side. This one still has a bit of core, and I'm just going to go in at an angle and pull all of that out. Same with this quarter. Go in at an angle and pull all of that out. And then, same with these other portions here. This one still has the base, so let's get rid of that. And core our cabbage. And I think, honestly, what we have left here should be mostly workable. I still see in this large one a good deal of core, so let's just cut him down a little bit more and get rid of the evidence of that core there and there. Now, what we're going to do is take some of these kind of wilted leaves. They feel a little bit like not so crispy, not so yummy. We're going to get rid of those. And then the rest of the cabbage that we're working here, I'm going to cut off a little bad spot that was the base of the cabbage. The rest of this we're cutting down basically to get to diced onion size, because we will be cooking the cabbage together with diced onions. Now I've already, like I said earlier, I've already cut the onion, so you didn't have to watch me do that, but it looks like you are going to see me cut down the cabbage. And this isn't precise, you know, it doesn't have to be exact to the size of the onion. You just want them to be roughly the same so that they'll cook at about the same rate. This outer leaf, that's another one that can go. You want them to cook at about the same rate, and you also want them to be relatively bite-sized pieces in your final dish. So we're just going to keep cutting this down. And what we're going to do with this cabbage and with the onion, once we've got it into a nice bite-sized pieces, is we're going to saute it with our onions. We're going to sweat down an onion, and we're going to cook down our cabbage with it. Now, this is how easy this recipe is, that I was not entirely sure that I wanted to do this recipe because it's so easy, it's not going to take a half an hour if you cook it the way most people do with packaged noodles. Once you've got your onion and your cabbage ready to go and all cooked down, basically you're adding in noodles, coating them with the butter that you sauteed your onion and cabbage in, tossing it all together in like a nice warm salad, and that's it. That's your dinner. or side item. It really can be served either way. Now, to make it a little bit more challenging for a Tullahoma's cooking episode, we're actually going to make the noodle. And we're going to make something, if we took the time to really, really form and shape it, okay, it would be a noodle. We're going to make something a little closer on the side of a dumpling. Same recipe, same concept. It's just a matter of we're not going to roll it down, cut it into thin strips. We're just going to dumpling it out. And I think a lot of you are probably pretty familiar with dumplings as well. Now, that was a big head of cabbage right there. I don't think we're going to use all of that. I'm going to turn up my butter a little bit, and I think I mentioned I've already got some water boiling away on the back there. And getting my butter up to heat. Now, one thing that a lot of cooks do, instead of butter, is you can fry up a little bacon. Actually, this is what's left of having made a whole package of bacon. And if you make it in your pan, and you just use the grease that's in the pan as your fat base for the cabbage and the onion. If you want to stay away from the meat products, this is an easy recipe to do just using the cabbage, onion, and noodles, like I said. So that's your choice there, whether you want to be meat-based or butter-based. Butter always makes things better, and we're actually going to go ahead and toss in some of that already cooked bacon at the back end when we get there anyway. So now for sweating down our onion and cabbage. This is 2 onions, 2 yellow onions, already chopped down, ready to go. And I like to keep the proportions roughly the same. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and dump this bowl of onions in there. Give them a little stir here. And then I'm going to just refill this bowl with the cabbage. And whatever's left over is left over, and we'll either make Haluski again another night, or we'll make some slaw, or we'll make something else with that leftover cabbage. So this, I don't mind going a little bit more cabbage than onion. That's fine. I can heap up the bowl, but that's about as far as I want to get. That was a lot more cabbage than onion. Now, if you've got a lot of people to feed, no reason you can't match that amount of cabbage with onion, and instead of reserving the cabbage, just cut more onion. But then you probably also want a little bit more butter. I started off with a half a stick for the amount that we're using. It may end up wanting just a little bit more, but you probably may have to go to a whole stick if you're using a whole head of cabbage and upping your onion content. So basically all you're waiting for now with your onion and cabbage is for them to cook down in the butter that is in there. So we're going to let those guys cook down a little bit, and when we come back, I'm going to clear off that cabbage here, and we will start working on our noodle portion of this dish when we come back. Welcome back. Now we've got our cabbage and our onions sauteed down in that butter, getting that lovely smell. We're about to start to make our noodle, and before I forget to season our mixture over here, we're going to do a little bit of that. We've got just a teaspoon of salt and a teaspoon of pepper good to go in there. We'll give those a little mix, get them into our cabbage, onion, and butter mix happening over here. And honestly, this is how fast this is to come together. If you were preparing a packaged noodle right now, and they came out, you could put them in there, coat the noodle with this mixture, and you're done. Dinner is served. Now, I can't give you a 15-minute cooking show, so we're making the noodle today. And to do that, I have 1 cup of flour, an egg, and a little bit of salt. Let's go ahead and put that little bit of salt into our flour right now. Just a pinch, that's all you need. And the egg. Now, we're going to put our egg right there in the center. And take a fork and just work all that in together until it gets good and incorporated. Now, this isn't all the liquid we're going to need. I'm going to use a little bit of water as well. Just going to give the egg a chance to get first dibs on that flour. And then I'm going to add water in just incrementally because I don't want a very, very wet dough. I want a cohesive dough, but we're looking at probably 2 tablespoons at most, and I'm not even going to start with the whole ramekin there. We're just going to see how much we need as we go. And then over here, I've got a little extra flour. Once this starts to come together, I'll use that to sort of spread this out and knead it on this surface. Now I'm seeing this is not a wet enough dough to really stick together. And put a little more water in there. Mix it up a little bit more. And this is, you know, just feel as you go. The last thing you really want is to have too wet a noodle. So we're going to add a little bit more, just incrementally, until you see it's really starting to come together. And that's part of the reason I use this clear bowl, so you can see that start to happen on the, you know, through the sides there, although it is a flour covered bowl, so I know it's not 100% clear to see. All right, I may actually not have used enough water yet, but I do start to feel that dough forming. I'm going to get my hands in there and see how wet it is and whether it will be coherent here. I'm coherent. See if it will be cohesive. Evidently, I'm not coherent. And yes, it's starting to come together, but I do think we can use a little bit more water. So let's do that. Give myself a little more to play with. But again, just add a little at a time. It's really easy to get impatient and add too much. And you just want it to come together. All right, so we've got a good amount of that working now. And it's sticking to my hand. That's what you do. I may have just gotten too impatient right there. I may have just put too much water in there. We'll see. Yeah, that's going to be a little wet. So I'm going to get rid of this bowl completely and add some of that flour. There we go. All right, now see, I knew it was gonna be too wet a dough right there. I'm still working it. And we're just gonna add some flour back in to make it a more cohesive unit there. All right, since there's already stuff on my hands, let's go ahead and add some flour to that and see if we can't get it back into the dough and off of my hand just a little bit. A little more flour there. Yeah. Hey, it's, you know, it's playtime. Playtime. You get to, you play with Play-Doh when you're a kid. Here you go, noodle dough. Same concept. Let's go ahead and get this guy out of the way. Now, what we could do right from this stage, we could just drop them in like dumplings. I'm going to go ahead and roll it out just a little bit so that we've got a somewhat consistent size to them. All right, just bat that out a little bit, bat that out a little bit. Oh, a couple pieces. Use that little bit of wetness to pick up those extra pieces. All right, that one's already dried up. There we go. And there. I think that's a good cohesive dough we can play with now. Let me wash this off my hands. All right, now we're gonna grab that rolling pin. Get a little bit of that flour on that rolling pin there. And I don't even want to cut it out into individual noodle strips. I just want to sort of get an idea for how much I'm playing with here. Okay. Let's see how much we've got. I'm rolling it out just a little bit. And like I said, I'm going to do something between making a strip noodle and making a dumpling. So I may actually decide to use my pizza cutter and cut a noodle in there, but I'm not entirely sure that's going to be necessary. That looks like that's about a nice even, yeah, head off some of that extra flour there. We got a little bit heavier on that side. There we are. And there you go. So I'm just going to grab my knife and make little noodle dumpling strips that will at least be roughly consistent in, in their width. And we've got our boiling water is over there just waiting. Here you go, have that one. There you have it. Have this other one too. The small ends there. I'm going to cut these other ones down that are still a bit long. And we're just going to go, why not make a flat noodle? That works for me. Just cut them right across there. Make that one noodle dumpling. See? It can be our test for when the other ones are done. And then we're just gonna throw them in to the water. This time it actually is water that I mean. Sometimes I refer to the liquid we're cooking with as water when it's not what we're dealing with, but this time it is. So, all right. And we're basically just waiting for them to sort of come up to the top and say, hey, I'm done. Have a look at me. So let's add a light to that process so I can see when they come up. And when our noodles are done cooking, let me give them a good stir while we're still adding some in so they don't stick together. We have our boiling water keeping them apart a little bit, but you want to make sure they, in this stage where they're still so wet, you want to make sure that they do have a little separation. I'm going to keep adding these little bits of dumpling noodle dough into our water, and then we're going to wait for those to cook. When we come back, we'll finish our assembly process. I'll be ready to take them out of the water after this. Welcome back to Tullahoma's Cooking. We have got our Haluski noodle in our boiling water about ready to come out and add to our cabbage and onion over here to get to our final dish. Now we've got a good batch of dumplings coming to the surface here in the boiling water, and we'll take a look at those, which we've done some cross between a dumpling and a noodle here, and they look like they are well cooked through. Still a little stiff, but pretty close, pretty close. You want to give them about 5 to 7 minutes. In fact, that's actually a fairly nice chewy texture right there. But let's give them just a second more, and while they're doing that, we're going to take a look at our cabbage and onion. You can see has cooked down really nicely here. And we're going to add in that bacon, let it get nice and warm. And this, I'll be honest with you, this is the first time that I've made Haluski with bacon in it. Traditionally, I do this very, very quickly. I do the packaged noodles. I just cut up some cabbage, onion, saute them down, add some noodles, and call it dinner. But when I saw that some people make this with bacon grease in the same pan, having made their bacon, and I had bacon in my fridge that had been cooked and needed to be used, I thought, well, heck, let's just add it in at the end. I'm a big fan of what butter brings to the table here, so in my case, I wasn't really interested in trying to do all of this in bacon grease. But, you know, if that's your thing, a lot of people I know are just bacon fanatics. If that's your thing, go for it. It can be done any number of ways. Now, we're going to go back and try those noodle dumplings again. See how we are? You know, it's not like spaghetti. I can't just throw it against a wall and see how we're doing. Okay. Okay. That's got just a little bit more tooth than you might use for another purpose. But this actually should be really, really nice coated in onion and butter. So let's start moving them over. All right. And you're just, if you've got whatever tool you've got, I bought these strainers at Christmas this year, so it's my first time getting to use them. and just drain off the water, get your noodle over into your dish. And don't worry if you get a little bit of that pasta water into your dish. It will help everything sort of adhere, come together, and just taste delicious. Pasta water almost never hurts any dish that you're cooking, unless of course you put too much of it in. I think I've got one more wayward dumpling. There he is. That we're going to throw in there, and then I can turn off my boiling water. Good deal. Now we're just going to stir all this in, get our bacon up to temperature, get our dumplings all coated with that delicious seasoned butter, and just let that sit there for a second. I might even give it another little pinch of salt. Let that sit and season together. And we'll take one last commercial break, come back, plate it, give it a try, see how it came out after this. All right, welcome back. Well, even with making our own homemade noodles or dumplings, we still got this recipe done in a very quick amount of time, a matter of minutes it feels like. And what we have in this pot looks and smells delicious. So let's take a look at our haluski. Now it is a very sort of one color brown looking dish. So you want to put it on a colorful plate or next to a colorful main course, unless this is your main course, and for me it very, very often is. You can see we've got our cabbage, you can see those little bits of bacon. Here is our noodle right there. The onion, the cabbage, the salt, the pepper, that little flavor of the bacon. Let me get that little bit of bacon right there. Have you never tried this? 100%. I think you're going to love it if you like cabbage. If you don't know that you like cabbage, but you like coleslaw, it's worth giving it a try. I think you'll be very pleasantly surprised, as I was when I first found this recipe. I hope you'll try it, I hope you'll enjoy it, and I hope you'll join me next time on Tullahoma's Cooking.